Let's talk about three Brazilian legends, basically, that were involved on Fight Night. Number one, Jose Aldo goes into the Hall of Fame. But more to the point, BC, let's start here. Glover Teixeira and Shogun Rua retire on the exact same night. Shogun Rua lost on the prelims rather badly. Glover Teixeira did not lose. Well, he lost badly in the sense that he got beat up, but he showed, a ton of resiliency through the whole thing. He didn't look frail in that way. So BC, taking all that into account, let's start first with Teixeira and Rua. What are their respective legacies in the sport?
They're certainly different, and as we talked about, a big part of Glover's success was backloaded in that regard. But it's like, these are it's a trope I keep reaching for lately. But these are the last of the Cowboys, Luke. These really are. I mean, these are the guys. In Shogun's case, he actually came from that old era, the prime pride run that he had. That not only was he still around today, but as we talk, I mean, he somehow stayed relevant in his twilight. It was ridiculous. To the fact that these guys are still around today and now going away, they had to endure evolution, years, damage, all of that. And at the end of the day, they are about doing exactly what Glover did. And I'm sure Shogun would have tried to do if he didn't get stopped early, which was just let it all hang out. You talk about gameness, the whole idea of not being overly worried on the cost, on the damage it takes. I mean, look, there's people with great chins in history or recuperative abilities. And then to me, there's the Brazilian legends, and the chins don't last forever. And Shogun's been stopped a couple times in recent years, but dude, it's just it's the chin mixed with the attitude and the toughness and the backstory, and certain regions can identify themselves in certain ways. And right now, the folks from Dagestan in that area are certainly doing that too. But man, these guys are just bout it. I was glad they got to go out together on the same night in different ways. UFC's return to Brazil and first time in 3 years. There was just something pure about it, and I think that's it. What's their legacy outside of everything they both accomplished? Shogun, I think, a little bit more than Glover, but who's comparing notes here? It's always been that pure ability that, like, if you're paying money to see them, you're going to get the best of them. And they may walk into the buzzsaw like Shogun did against John Jones, and that's just what happens in this game. But man, are they about it, and to have the type of longevity that they had, not just Shogun in totality, but for Glover to actually figure out how to be the best of himself in his, early onset washed years that we're enduring right now, that's a huge part of what made him great.
Yeah, for me, there'd be two different ones with Glover. I mean, I don't know if folks realize this. He went on I'm sure some do, obviously, but just as a reminder anyway, he went on a 20-fight win streak from 2005 to 2014. 20 fights in a row he won. He didn't lose a single one in between. Now, that's not just UFC. In fact, a lot of that is not UFC. But the point I'm trying to make is when he went 2-2 to start his career, and then after that, he went 22-2 before he met John Jones. An incredible achievement by itself, the kind of thing he was putting together very quietly. He had a very quiet start to his career. He had very quiet moments throughout large parts of it. I mean, here's the funny part about it. He started when a lot of other of his Brazilian contemporaries started, around sort of post 9/11, around 2002-ish, around that time, and then wanted to build a career from there. But he missed the heyday of Pride. He didn't get it early enough of a start to get a call up over there. And he missed the early UFC boom post 2005 as well. He did not make his UFC debut until I think 2011 or 2012. Let me verify that.
Yeah, he lost. What did he lose? Like 5 years of his prime because UFC wanted him, but he couldn't get the visa to get in?
Yeah, the visa issues, which you talked about. He didn't make it till 2012. I mean, Shogun had already become a Pride champ and a UFC champ, and then lost the UFC champ before Glover even made his UFC debut. He lost years of his career. But it should be noted, when you think about the Brazilian legends, especially at light heavyweight, Shoguns, Vanderleis, Aronas, you could go to, let's see who else, Renato Sobral. You could go on and on.
What about the king of the streets?
Yes, no. Well, Marco Ruas was heavyweight, but I'm talking about light heavyweight.
Oh, he could have cut down to 205 if it was a thing.
He could have. Also, Little Nog goes in that. There was a general class of Brazilian excellence that came out at that time, especially at light heavyweight. Glover never really got the credit as being part of that, but he very much was part of that class. It just took him a little while longer by virtue of how much time he lost with all his visa issues and then getting back and then obviously getting a title at age 42 years old. That's the first thing I'd say. The second part about his career that really stands out to me, BC, is just very simply, he is a testament to what happens when you're perseverant and you make commitment to martial arts development just a part of your life. You know, his success, some guys got success in 2005, like Shogun, and some guys got success later in 2007, 2008, 2009, again, that Brazilian class and whatnot. And he never did. He had to wait until 2022 to get, or 2021 even. What year was it when he finally beat Prochazka? 2022.
21.
June of that year. He had to wait that long. He had to wait 20 years into his career to finally get the acclaim that he deserved. That is a testament, and that only happens when you're a blue-collar guy as part of your identity and you pack a lunch every day, and every day you go to the gym and just get a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. So I think of him as that Brazilian class, BC, and I also think of him as one of these lunch pail guys who is just a testament to what happens when you don't fucking quit. For Shogun, BC, it's a little bit different. He did burst early. He is one of the most important legends in all of Brazilian MMA. He's one of the best Brazilian, frankly, outright MMA fighters ever. He had arguably the very best calendar year any MMA fighters ever had in 2005. I'm going to say flatly, he had the best run through any tournament any fighter has ever had through the Pride Middleweight Grand Prix. He did fall on hard times and should have retired probably a long time ago. But in terms of his upside, part of one of the most important Brazilian rivalries of all time between Shoot to Box and Brazilian Top Team, best tournament run ever, arguably best year ever, and a real dynamite savage when it came to making very dangerous Muay Thai a part of finishing, a part of high-level fighting. And not just him, of course, Vanderlei and others, Anderson Silva, but he was a big part of that too.
Indeed. And you know, keeping with the trio there, Jose Aldo had already retired, although he has a pro boxing debut coming up on UFC Fight Pass. But that took me off guard almost as much as it took him off guard. I think, you know, that's typically how UFC does it, where I think Jose found out while he was sitting in the arena, Luke, on the screen, that he would be, you know, is he the headliner? If not, right up there for this year's Hall of Fame class. But to see him break down, not just like once for a little bit, but like they almost threw to a commercial and threw the camera back at him, and he was still broken down, Luke. Like, damn, dude, you know, like that, how does that not touch you? You know, you think somebody like Joe, you think when anytime somebody gets so much stardom and, you know, and championships and acclaim and all that, how many times have we seen people change, you know, maybe separate from harboring an escaped politician, Luke. That's about as pure from a pure gentleman a moment that you could imagine, to see how much that actually meant to him. And, you know, like Anderson in the modern era was the flashy one, you know, that represented Brazilian MMA, but Jose Aldo was the clock ticking every time, consistent, destroying one. I was a little surprised to see that get to him like that, but I loved it, man. I loved it.
Yeah, I mean, I think during the time, you could argue like Demetrius has gone on to do things better in MMA than Jose. I'm not necessarily making that argument, but certainly one could. But and again, they didn't have flyweight at WEC when Demetrius was around. But just as a matter of fact, Jose Aldo, to me, they made Uriah Faber for a long time the face of that organization, but the real face of that organization was Jose Aldo. He's the best fighter in WEC history. He's one of the 5 best fighters ever, in my view. You could have him even higher than that if you wanted to. He's one of the very best premier talents ever to come out on planet Earth, sub 155. He showed what could happen when you marry dynamic athleticism with, you know, obviously he had all the various parts of the game, because it was a brown belt world champion, not a black belt, but he beat Cobrinho into getting in the world championships at brown belt before they both made it to black. And dude, he was one of these guys, like he came out with this devastating leg kicking in Muay Thai. And then I remember when Gray Maynard went to go wrestle with him, was like mind blown at how good his defensive wrestling was. He was good at defensive wrestling before any of the very good strikers really in MMA were as good. Because there was guys who could strike and had defensive wrestling, but not guys who you thought of primarily as strikers who could do it. He did it. I mean, we are talking about the very highest level of excellence in the sport that this guy achieved. It was a 10-year undefeated run. Basically, they just don't come much better than Jose Aldo. Facts. Sorry.
Did he deserve a McGregor rematch and not get it?
I thought so, but you know, the sport moves on. You know,
it was cool to see him mention that, you know, he looks back at Conor so positively because, you know, Conor got him his biggest payday, you know, ever, and elevated his, you know, brand in that regard. So That story mixed with when he told Oscar Willis at the post-fight press conference that Conor put red panties on Jose's door the night before at UFC 200. It's kind of hilarious, Luke, to a certain degree, if you care about that stuff. But no, the king of Hio, Luke, the king indeed. It's funny, you just said top 5, and I always sort of have a working upper table top 5. Not that it really matters. It's just my own personal hierarchy. And I get a lot of slander from people saying like, dude, you got to reshuffle that deck and put Jose in there. And you just said top 5, but it's like, you can't only have 5. I wonder though, if I have been wrong, because I typically reserve that space for Anderson, George, John, Fedor, and who am I missing there, Luke?
Demetrius.
And then you have to ask yourself, did Habib enter that, or did he go just short? Did DC enter that?
I would not put Habib over Jose Aldo, I don't think.
Okay,
I don't know. I have to think about that, but...
Did Cormier pass that when he knocked out Stipe in the first fight, or did he lose it? It's like there's a gray area. There's a lot of great names, but... I wouldn't be wrong if I decided to reshuffle the deck and put him in there in that top 5 because
I just don't think people understand all the ways in which he contributed to the growth of MMA, not just as a popular attraction, although there's some debate about that because he was never really a major pay-per-view star, but in terms of the skills he was able to showcase. Like, we didn't even talk about his boxing, his ability to slip punches, re-angle and pivot off the front foot, body attacks by combining things. The guys just weren't slipping punches. Like you see it fairly regularly now to some success, some not. Jose was doing that fucking 14 or whatever when it was years ago at this point, way ahead of his time, way ahead of the rest of the crew. Everyone, like the reason why he was so dominant was everyone had to play catch up for years. For years it took that long for the division to even figure out what possible ways you could even slow a guy down like that. So I just don't think folks really appreciate how much he contributed to the technical maturation of the sport, especially for the lighter weight guys. Really, really had a very direct hand in it.
And I love when he came over from the WEC, they're like, we're not even going to have him fight for the championship here. You're the UFC featherweight champion. Go ahead. And he went ahead, Luke.
How could you do anything else? It'd be so disrespectful.